Good morning. New Year's Eve. Sorry, I forgot to bring my light up here, so we have to deal with the darkness this morning. Barbara Richardson, welcome to you. Who else is coming in this morning? So far, Barbara, just you and me. Good morning to you. Welcome everybody on this New Year's Eve, Thursday morning. Jeremy and Wendy, welcome this morning. Letitia, Sexton, good morning to you. Daryl and Suzanne, welcome. Glad you're getting to enjoy family with you guys these days. I've enjoyed some of the pictures you've posted. Good morning to you. So today, we're going to be talking about developing a rule of life. Lori Agassi, good morning to you. Sally Crocker, good morning. I've said it a couple of times this week that this is the time of year I set aside to, examine my life, realign things, and so on. Hey, good morning, Mark Cooper. Morning, brother. And so what I thought I'd do is I'd take a few days, beginning today, to talk about how, what standard do I use to adjust and calibrate my life. I've used those words last couple of days with regard to, you evaluate your life. You have to, if you're going to, as you evaluate your life, you have to have some sort of standard that you are going for, a target, right? If we don't have a clearly defined goal or a target, then, we won't be able to measure our growth, our progress. We have to be able to fail if we don't meet a particular expectation we have or a particular goal. And so when we fail, then we adjust our strategies, we adjust how we spend our time, and so on, and then we again move forward. So that's what this time of year, this is one of the things I'm doing. I'm recalibrating, I'm adjusting, I'm seeing where I failed to live out the prescribed expectations that I had set for myself, and then I adjust my life. Where in my life do I need to make adjustments? To recalibrate my focus, my attention, sight in my scope, if you will, to make sure that I'm hitting the target with accuracy. And so this calibration, this sighting in, creating a target, is what is called creating a rule of life. A rule of life is simply a structural way of achieving the desired goal of infusing, incorporating, allowing, I'm lacking the proper words to describe this, to make sure that God and our relationship with God is a part of everything we do and everything we say. Every relationship, all our life goals, our practices, our fun, recreational things, everything, that God is a part of every aspect of our lives. We create a rule of life. In other words, several, like a rack, or like sometimes I look at it like a coat rack where I have a bunch of hooks, and each hook represents a different part of my life, and I've set a particular standard for that aspect of my life. These govern my practices, what I do every day, every week, every month. These govern my practices so that over a period of time, I can measure my own growth to achieve the goal of making sure that God is at the center of my attention in all my relationships, every activity, all my words, and so on. Now, obviously, I'm the first to admit that I fail in this area all the time, but I wouldn't know that I failed unless I had a clear picture of what my aspirations are. So I journal a couple of things down just to start this process. And we'll spend a few days because I have 4 major categories of my rule of life. So I wrote this down. What is a rule of life? A rule of life is an intentional, conscious plan to keep God at the center of all I say and do. That is my simple definition of the rule of life. And the verse that comes to mind, and I jotted this down, is Colossians 3:17, which says, "And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." And so I want my entire life, everything I do, not just my spiritual activities like prayer and reading the Bible and communicating the gospel. Those are obvious ways that God is working in and through me. But I want every part of my life, how I interact with people, what does my marriage look like? How do I go and have fun? What kind of balance do I have in my life? What kind of priorities do I have? I want all of that to have Jesus at the center. And so I've created a rule of life, and there are just 4 categories for me. I try to keep it as simple as possible because it gets complicated real quick. These 4 major categories and there's lots of overlap between these categories, but it's helpful to create separate categories where I measure and clearly define what my target is, what I'm trying to accomplish, and how I'm strategizing how to keep Jesus at the center of my life and thus grow into the person God wants me to be. And so here's my 4 categories. Number 1, relationships. Number 2, my spiritual life. Number 3, my personal life and physical health. And number 4, work. Anything I categorize as work, not just an occupation, but anything that is categorically work for me. So those are my 4 areas. And then underneath those 4 areas, I have subsections that help me define and create goals in those sections. And so today I'm just going to talk about relationships, and I'm only going to talk about it briefly. We only have a few minutes each morning, and so I'm going to tackle different things throughout this next series in our devotional time together. And tomorrow, hopefully, I'll bring a light out here. Not tomorrow, but Monday, so you can see me better. I apologize. So my first category is relationships. So relationships, and my rule of life, the 4 main categories don't change. I've done this for lots and lots of years, by the way. I started doing this in my 20s. And when I started out, I had, I think, 6 categories that I was working with. And over the years, I've simplified it down to 4. And the sub parts of these categories change. As I grow and my life experience changes, my relationships change, my career has evolved, my responsibilities of life have evolved, from children at home in my 20s as babies to teenagers in my house to being empty nesters. And so my rule of life and my targets and my specific goals underneath these 4 categories, they evolve, they change with my life. So here's how it reflects today in very recent years for me, and again as I look forward. Here's what relationships look like to me today. What am I trying to develop? What am I targeting so that I'm making God or Jesus the center of everything I do? So there's 2 broad categories under relationships for me. One is my marriage. And I've written this specific statement to describe my marriage. Marriage must be my first ambition, my first passion, and my greatest gospel message. And so this has been a work in progress. All of us who have been married for any length of time know that a great marriage just does not happen by default. It doesn't happen naturally. The movies and maybe romantic novels might have us believe that, but we know in practice and in reality, marriage, you have to be intentional. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of dying to self. It's a lot of asserting ourselves in healthy ways. It's caring for the needs of another person in a way that occupies your ambitions, your passion. You make it your vocation. And so, I apologize for those who are watching who are single. I could create an entire new category. If I were single, I would make singleness my greatest ambition, passion, and gospel message for Jesus. Okay, this isn't just exclusively to people who are married. It's about being intentional. And if I'm single, I have this gift of God for the breadth of relationships that I can invest in. And so I create a rule of life under relationships for my singleness, to invest wisely in that time and be very intentional about it. So, but for me, I'm married. It's my vocation. And I have to prioritize it in a way that reflects my first ambition, my first passion, and my greatest gospel message. Let me just illustrate this a little bit for you. So in my 20s, I did not prioritize my marriage. It was not till my late 20s that I started doing this. It was really out of some bad experiences where my rule of life, though I didn't define it as such back then, was destroying my marriage. Because here's how I thought, literally. I thought, God is first in my life. There's no one higher than God. And secondly is my calling of God, and that's ministry. Marriage is at best third. I literally felt this way in my early 20s. I was so ambitious I just wanted to do what God wanted me to do. And so this is something I would say to Martha, who would tell Martha, or Martha would tell me, Mark, I need more time with you. I need your attention. I need help with our babies, I need you. I mean, any women out there, can you relate to this at all? Yeah. And my heart's passion was for ministry and to serve God. And this is sounding awful, I know, but this is what it was. It was unintended, unhealthy behavior, but I was passionate about it. And so I would literally tell Martha, if you want to spend more time with me, come down to the church building, because that's where I'll be. I am there all day long, into the night. I am serving people. I am studying. I am preparing to teach. I'm doing ministry, and that's what God has called me to do. You married a pastor, and if you want to spend more time with me, you need to go down to the church building, because that's where I'll be. I even, people that I was discipling at the time, I would tell them that too. I would say, this is how you need to prioritize your life. I was an idiot, okay, in my 20s with regard to this. I had youthful ambition, trying to serve God, but doing it in a very wrong, unhealthy way. And my marriage was suffering because of it. And so over the years, I have learned and am continuing to learn to make my marriage my first ambition, my first passion, and the greatest gospel message that I can preach to the world is a good, strong, healthy marriage. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of attention. And I can't allow my passions and my ambitions to be focused elsewhere. My wife has to be my number one ambition, passion. So that's the first part of my rule of life. With regard to relationships, is my marriage. And then I create sub-goals under that of how do you make that your first passion? How do you make that your first ambition? What does that look like? And so I write down very specific ways that I attempt to do that, and of course with a lot of feedback from Martha, and so on. Relationships, number one. Marriage, number one, under relationships. The second part of relationships for me, and the second category is my emotional health, developing good emotional health, and that falls under, that's two subcategories under emotional health, and that is understanding and anchoring my identity in Christ. That's number one of understanding or having good emotional health. Is first of all knowing, who am I? Who am I in Jesus? What is my worth? What is my value? And since we've talked a lot about this in the last couple of weeks, I won't go any further than that. But it's anchoring myself in my identity with Christ. And there I can freely give of myself to others, and I can be humble, and I can not be overly defensive when someone does something that, upsets me or whatever, being anchored in who I am. And secondly, under developing or being emotionally healthy is developing healthy tools to relate to and love others well. Love God, love people, right? So I'm developing tools how to relate to and love other people well. And for the last couple of years, here are the 3 ways that I do that. How do I love other people, relate to other people well? Number 1, I'm learning to communicate clearly. What do I mean by this? To express my desires, wants, and needs, to actually communicate what I want, what I desire, and I need. I have a tendency to neglect that. I have a tendency to feel like no one really wants to know what you want, what you need. You just need to be serving other people and so on, and which I do, but I'm learning to be clearer, because then that doesn't set me up to have false expectations, to be, upset when someone doesn't understand my needs, but I haven't ever communicated them, right? And then secondly, to listen well under developing communication tools. I want to communicate well myself, what my needs, my wants, desires are, and I want to be able to listen well to other people. I want to sit and listen without my own agenda. I just want to listen clearly and well, so develop tools of communication. Secondly, I hold my emotions. I've talked a lot about this, so I won't go into great detail, but under this category of holding my emotions, what I mean by this is understand my emotions. So I journal and describe and relate to. I have a long history of being a stuffer. I stuff my emotions. I'm an emotional suppressor. And so the idea of my holding my emotions or understanding my emotions is a new thing that I've been developing the last few years. It allows me to be freer and enjoy life, really. Secondly, under holding my emotions is value appropriate negative emotions. I've said this a ton of times. I'm learning that negative emotions aren't bad. They just feel bad, right? We talked about that. I don't need to go into detail. And the third part of holding my emotions is to grieve well. I've experienced profound loss in the last 5 years of my life, and tragic loss that has cracked open my soul in a way that I had a great difficulty in understanding even how to deal with. And the tragic loss of my brother and sister-in-law, Brad and Mary, in 2018, and this year losing my dad, a figure in my life who is a part of my formative identity, is my father. And so learning how to grieve well has been a process. I've read several books on this and so on. So creating a rule of life, like I want to do that well, so what do? I give myself assignments, reading books. What does grieving well look like, and so on. So it's living intentionally. It's what we talked about yesterday. And then the last thing on this list, and I'll end with this today, resolve conflict in healthy ways. I'm also a conflict avoidant personality. Anybody can relate to that? And that's just unhealthy when you were just achieving peace, but it's a false peace. If we're not directly dealing with the elephant in the room, right? And expressing and talking through conflict and being a good listener in the midst of conflict, developing good tools. So my first point, I have 4 points of my rule of life. First one deals with relationships. My marriage first, and then being emotionally healthy so I can love other people well. And so I just create goals. And how do I do that? Strategies. How do I do that? And then I periodically look at my rule of life and how am I doing? Oh yeah, I've kind of neglected this area that I've declared as really important to me. I need to up my game there. Or I'm really doing well in this other area, and kudos to you, for see how God is working in your life. And so it's infusing, making God the center of everything we do. So my marriage and my relationships with people, dealing with my own emotional health. So that's the beginning of our discussion on creating a rule of life to help you live intentionally. And I'm excited to keep talking about this. We'll talk again about it on Monday. Lord bless you today as you endeavor to make Jesus the center of everything you do. Lord bless you.